Hi there, and welcome to 99 Yards American Football for UK fans. We really enjoyed the 2018 review of the college football season, so much so that we're back to talk more college ball as a regular feature. I'm your host, George Somerville, and this week I'm joined again by fellow 99 Yards college writers, Ollie Hodgkinson and Alex Chinnery. Hi guys, how are you both?
Yeah, not so bad, thanks, George. Just about recovered from the Super Bowl, so looking forward to getting into some college football.
Yeah, feeling great. My time of year, draft season, recruiting season, perfect.
It is a busy old time of the year, so let's get straight to it. In this week's episode, we'll be talking about some recent college transfers, the Senior Bowl and Shrine Game, pick out our top prospects, and our first top 10 picks mock draft live on the pod. So let's dive straight into the first topic. There's been a lot of debate about the college transfer system. Recent high-profile transfers have been quarterbacks Justin Fields, Tate Martell, and Jacob Eason. Guys, the rule is really in place to allow for the transfer of players who wouldn't otherwise be playing. What's your view on the transfer rule? Is it working out as designed, or is it being flaunted by young players, which the rule isn't really designed for?
Firstly, have either of you read the NCAA transfer rule book?
I have to say I haven't, Ollie.
I know it a little bit, not.
No, I had a flick through. I'd like to think I'm a relatively intelligent person, but the in-depth nature of that rule book is really something else. I think the question for me, more than is it being flaunted by the young players, is more why are more players looking to transfer. You see, the problem now in football is the clamour to get to the NFL and earn that payday. College athletes aren't paid, so the lure of the NFL and that big payday, players can't really now afford to just sit and wait to play. They need to get material on tape for the NFL teams to get an idea of how good a talent they are. If you look at this year's draft class, it's made up of 135 underclassmen, I believe. You can't just wait behind other players to move up to the NFL anymore. You want to be the players that, as juniors, are making that transition. So for me, I don't think the problem is how the rules are being targeted by players. It's the why on that front.
Yeah, I agree. Similarly, in that the rule book isn't very clear, as you just said, and so some of these players are able to leverage working with lawyers to get immediate eligibility, and some aren't. But the main issue around it is the coaches at these programs can move at the drop of a hat, and so someone who's just recruited you, or someone who is a central figure in you going to study at that university, to play football at that university, can move on with real ease, but the players can't. And it's time to let them, in my opinion, you should be allowed immediate eligibility on your first transfer. Because if that situation isn't right for you, you're still a kid, you're learning, you're getting an education, you should have the ability to move once, maybe twice even, without penalty. Because you need to be doing what's best for these kids. They're the currency of college football. They're what makes the game great. Let's help them out. You're not paying them. You're already making a huge killing off of them without giving them any part of it. You've got to try and make their lives easy.
And I think that's the point, Alex, isn't it? It seems a bit rich that the teams are saying, well, you know, it's at best disrupting the system, and at worst it's detrimental to the university. And by that, I think they mean the team, which means that you can restrict the player, but you're happy to leverage on the back of the player's name, the player's talent, and actually they do that for many years to come, and that's probably the subject of a topic on another pod. But it seems a bit rich that they would want to restrict the players from moving on, when principally these guys aren't playing, right? They're not first choice, which is why they're wanting to move on. And you know, I mentioned the transfers of Fields and Martell and Eason, all of whom are quarterbacks. Which of these guys or any of the others that catch your eye?
Well, for me, you've got to go back to the guy who started this transfer merry-go-round. About this time last year, Jacob Eason announced he was transferring away from the Georgia program. He was beaten out by Jake Fromm towards the end of that year. Obviously, Fromm's an incredible talent, young, rising freshman at that point. And so, obviously, he transferred out. He's gone to Washington. He was made to sit a year. And really, the college football world has forgotten just how talented this guy is. He's going, obviously, to Washington, playing under Chris Peterson, who's a fantastic coach, a fantastic program, really in a division that isn't that strong. And so he can have a real impact there if he goes and really sort of puts himself about, makes a name for himself in that Washington offense.
Yeah, I mean, George, you mentioned Tate Martell and Justin Fields in your original question. Obviously, Fields transferring to Ohio State has kind of rained on Tate Martell's parade a little bit. Haskins has gone off to the draft. Martell thinks he's going to walk in as the starter for the Buckeyes. And then they bring in Fields, and he's kind of seeing his career path there blocked off. So he's jumped ship to Miami, unless they find some legal way round. He'll sit for next year. But obviously, he thought he was going to be the starting quarterback for the Buckeyes, and he's not going to be now, probably. One for me that's quite interesting, we looked at Notre Dame a lot this season. Brandon Wimbush, he obviously was beaten out by Ian Book to the starting job at Notre Dame, and he's going to go off to UCF now. I find that quite interesting, and it makes me wonder what maybe the future holds for Mackenzie Milton in terms of his comeback from the serious injury he sustained this year. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was a horrible injury, right? So it clearly, and a long-term injury as well. I was never greatly impressed by Wimbush at Notre Dame, but we've seen many players move from one program to the next and really flourish in the new environment. So, kind of good luck to him, I think. But he's not the quarterback I thought he was going to develop into at Notre Dame, and actually, Ian Book came in very quickly and took that job from him. While we're on the subject of transfers, an interesting story to come out of USC this week with Brew McCoy decommitting from USC to move to Texas. What do you make of him ripping up his letter of intent, guys?
He's making a great decision. And, maybe you can accuse me of some Texas bias here, being a Longhorns fan, but he was recruited under the idea he was going to play for Cliff Kingsbury. And Cliff Kingsbury was the darling of offensive football at the time he was hired by USC. So much so that he's gone from being a failing head coach at Texas Tech to a really short stop in USC, and now he's the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals in the NFL. He was recruited, McCoy was recruited to play under this guy. That's why he flipped in the first place to USC. Now he's back at Texas. He's got some stability under Tom Herman, and what a fantastic prospect for Texas to be getting. The number 3 class overall, they're trending upwards, and it's a really, really good move for them.
Yeah, I mean, a comment that you made earlier, Alex, about coaches being able to move quite easily from team to team. They seem to be able to turn their back on a contract, whereas players don't seem to have that same freedom. Is obviously the case here. McCoy makes the headlines because he's the 5-star recruit, but he's not the only USC player that's looking to get out of there since Kingsbury jumped ship to Arizona. It does seem like it's not just the Kingsbury thing down there at USC. They do, I've heard some rumours of other bits and pieces going on behind the scenes there, which maybe that's having an influence on these players wanting to get out of that situation.
It does seem a bit of a mess at USC, and there's been stories for the last couple of years or last couple of seasons. I wonder how long Clay Helton's actually going to be able to hang on in there, because it doesn't seem as if that program's moving forward. And I think to lose someone of McCoy's status, I think it's going to be a difficult thing to recover from. And I read a bit that I think on the back of Brew McCoy decommitting, there's suggestions that I'm not sure. I haven't followed how it went today, but maybe the quarterback doesn't sign up as well. But just going back to the Brew McCoy thing, do you think he gets a waiver? Because it's all dependent on him getting a waiver to play this year. And again, not being familiar with the rule book, but I'm not sure that the moving from one school to the next because your head coach has moved gives you an instant waiver. So, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, personally, I think if USC are happy to rip up his letter of intent, then the NCAA should give him immediate eligibility. Because there's nothing stopping him there. There's no party that's hurt by him moving. If USC don't or kick up a fuss ripping up his letter of intent, then he will probably be made to sit out a year. I'm not sure that sitting out a year isn't the worst thing for him. He was a two-way athlete in high school. It's questionable whether he could come in and be an immediate contributor at wide receiver, which is probably where he's going to play. Maybe he's sitting that year, effectively a redshirt year, to get ready to get into the offense, and when Lil Jordan Humphrey goes next year, then they have Brew McCoy to come in with oodles of eligibility.
Yeah. I think sadly it comes back to something that Alex mentioned earlier. It's what's your legal representation like, which is a sad state of affairs in sport. I appreciate the NFL is a big business, but we sit down to watch a sport, and you don't want to think of all the legalities and legal representation and whether you can get a great or can't get a great lawyer as to deciding what is essentially a young lad's future at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's quite amazing because, again, in a similar position to Tate Martell, and read a little bit about he's now seeking legal representation, but actually one of the avenues open to him is to accelerate his graduation. So for anyone who watched QB1 and thought, Tate Martell has just started university, here he is. He's almost graduating to get him a move, he's got his move to Miami. But we're talking about the transfers. We're now really essentially moving on to the road to the draft. And I know you guys spent a lot of time watching the Senior Bowl and the Shine game this year. Alex, do you want to talk us through who you thought elevated their position in the week of the Senior Bowl?
The Senior Bowl is probably my favourite week in terms of draft analysis. It's like a real geek week for draft nuts like myself. I'm going to do 3 offensive prospects, actually, and what is a defense-heavy draft. I think Dalton Reisner, the O-line prospect from Kansas State, he's played tackle, a lot of right tackle at Kansas State, probably figures to kick inside to guard. He had an amazing week, brilliant in one-on-ones, and then absolutely shut down Montez Sweat in the game. He's a real high-character guy. I expect to see him go in around pick 20, 25, that sort of range. And he's a really good prospect. If you pick him up, he's going to lead your offensive line for years to come. Secondly, wide receiver is a position that hasn't really been talked about in this class yet, but it's an incredibly deep group of wide receivers. It's probably not a top 10 talent, but that next range from sort of 20 to 50 is full of really, really talented players. First of them, Terry McLaurin from Ohio State, has speed for days. He wowed everyone in one-on-ones, consistently getting separation, came up big in the game, and has a real good special teams ability and history at Ohio State. I think he probably elevated himself from a day 3 pick to a day 2 pick and would be a really good pickup in the 3rd round. You get maybe a wide receiver 3 for your team and a consistent special teams contributor is a perfect pick. Finally is a guy that was probably going to go late first, early second last year before injury, and that's Deebo Samuel. Had a quiet year at South Carolina, but really announced himself back on the stage at the Senior Bowl, was far and away the best player at the whole event all week, and really showed himself up as a can't miss receiver prospect almost. I really like his fit in Pittsburgh. Should they trade Antonio Brown, He's the perfect kind of guy you could bring in and be a number 2 opposite Juju, and would do big things in that offense.
And Ollie, I know you're a big advocate of the Shrine Game and wrote a really good article about this on 99 Yards recently. For anyone who isn't familiar, what is the Shrine Game and who caught your eye this year?
So whilst the Senior Bowl gets the majority of the attention from the All-Star Games, the Shrine Game has actually been the longest running of the Shrine Game, of the All-Star College Games. It's held the weekend before the Senior Bowl and plays hosts to not just prospects from colleges in the US, but also from Canada as well. Similar to the Senior Bowl, 2 teams which are coached by NFL personnel. This year, Sam Mills of the Panthers, he took the East team, and Adam Zimmer of the Vikings, he was responsible for coaching the West team. It gives the players the first-hand experience of working with the NFL coaches, and for the coaches, it gives them a first-hand look at players who might not feature so highly on some of the big boards going into the process. So a few players that caught my eye. West quarterback Brett Rippon out of Boise State, 10 of 14, 134 yards and a touchdown in the game. He actually leads them out in West all time in passing yards. I thought he looked composed in the pocket. He's not going to figure too highly in the quarterback class when you're looking at Haskins, maybe Murray, Block, Ryan Finley. But I thought he put in a really good performance against some more well-known quarterbacks that were at the Shrine Game, such as David Blau of Purdue. So I think he's probably put himself in the conversation to get to be a late round pick at quarterback, Brett Rippon. For the East, wide receiver Terry Godwin II out of Georgia. 4 receptions, 80 yards, 2 touchdowns in the game. He'd had only 3 touchdowns all season for Georgia. He has struggled with injuries in the past, which obviously throws up red flags when we get to this time of year and we're putting the prospects for either paces at the combine. I thought he showed good hands, good speed, though he did have a drop pass on a lateral as the time expired, as the East tried to get back in the game with some trickery at the end. Whether teams will take too much out of that, I don't know. And then a defensive prospect back on the West team, Justin Hollins out of Oregon. He had 10 tackles, 2 sacks, and actually took away defensive MVP of the game. Interestingly, Hollins, he can play defensive end or outside linebacker, so he's got that versatility that teams will crave in the NFL. He looked good run stuff in. He looked good getting after the quarterback, as his 2 sacks testify to. In a class that's quite loaded with defensive end talent, he could even fall as low as round 5, and you're going to pick up a real bargain that late in the day. So those 3 players that really caught my eye. A couple of other guys who I thought impressed over the whole process of the Shrine Game and the Senior Bowl. So Dalen Mack, a defensive lineman out of Texas A&M, and Jimmy Moreland, a cornerback out of James Madison. They were invited to the Shrine Game, impressed so much in that week and in that game that they were then invited to the Senior Bowl and continued to build through that process. Jimmy Moreland, cornerback, as I said, out James Madison, FCS player. They really use these games to get into the nation's eye, where they may not normally be seen on a week-to-week basis during the college football season. So I think they're 2 guys who really made money out of the process.
So that's where those weeks and those games really come to the fore, because as we've seen before, so many players, Baker Mayfield's one that really do rise to the occasion, and their draft stock increases dramatically as the week goes on. While we're on the subject of the draft, wanted to pick your brains about who your favourite or top prospects that perhaps the listeners might not be so familiar with. Who should we be watching out for in the lead up to the combine?
So, back on it again, back on the Texas train again. Linebacker Gary Johnson, he was a senior. I still don't know why he didn't get a Senior Bowl invite. I was gutted that he didn't, because I really wanted to see him in that setting. He has speed, coverage ability, makes plays in the middle of the field, He's good, can rush the passer, gets involved in the run game, was really really a good production guy throughout the last couple of years. There is some questions over a possible failed test earlier in the fall when he missed a game. That's not confirmed. It's the kind of thing that doesn't get confirmed. You just sort of put two and two together. But if you get him on day 3, it's a really good pick. I think you're getting a great player and someone who can contribute as long as he adapts to the speed of the NFL game. Another guy I really like is an edge rusher out of Old Dominion, O'Shane Ximenez. Has the chance to be the first ever Old Dominion player picked in the draft, I believe. I think it was Todd McShay who I saw that from earlier today. His prospects are probably hurt by the depth of this edge class. It's a hugely deep class. He's got talent, but he's probably going to be available in the sort of late second round, maybe early third if you're lucky kind of range, just because this class is so stacked. You're going to pick up a fantastic, really productive edge player who plays the run really, really well. He had 18.5 tackles for loss this year at Old Dominion, and he was the star on that defense, so teams were running away from him whenever they played. Yeah, that's just how productive he was.
For me, I mean, Alex mentioned Deebo Samuel in his Senior Bowl review, and I mentioned Terry Godwin II. Looking at wide receivers, how about Andy Isabella out of UMass? The guy led the nation in receiving yards this year, and it wasn't even close. He's a good 200 yards in front of the next guy. I think it was Tylan Wallace. At 5'10", people will point to his lack of size, but let's be honest, you don't have to be tall to catch a ball when you're 5-10 yards ahead of your man. He's so fast. Probably got a little bit of work to do in terms of efficiency with how he puts that speed down. He looks to try and maybe do too much with his feet, but if he can get that working, he's got speed to waste. I see him being a 3rd or 4th round prospect, and I think at that you're getting an absolute bargain with Andy Isabella. Another guy I'm quite hot on. I'm staying in Massachusetts. For my other guy to watch, Boston College have got 3 defensive backs in this class, and I think Ham Cheevers might be the best of them. Again, another nation leader, so he led the nation in interceptions this year with 7. Another small guy, I think he's 5'10", 5'11", but he has got the ball skills and the change of direction speed probably to succeed in the league as a nickel corner. I think he's one guy to watch out for.
So you totally stole my thunder there, Ollie, about Andy Isabella, because he definitely came out of the week of the Senior Bowl with quite a fanfare, and I love a soundbite. But Mike Renner had tweeted the week of the Senior Bowl, if you don't get your hands on it, Andy Isabella, you're toast, which suggested that he'd had such a good week, and I think he is definitely one to watch. So on the basis you stole my thunder, I've got 2, and I'm trying hard not to make this Texas Fest, but Alex is definitely been off on that. But listen, this is not a name that will be of news to people, but a guy who featured in a lot of first round mock drafts and has kind of fallen away only because of the depth of this draft is Chris Boyd, the cornerback at Texas. And again, I think he had a pretty good week. There's a lot of talk about his height and his flexibility, but I think he did enough to get him back in the discussion. I don't think he goes in the first round, but he certainly could go very quickly thereafter. And I find it hard to believe that I'm talking on a podcast about a player who comes from Washburn University, but Corey Ballantyne, another cornerback, had a particularly good week. Again, exactly the same height as Chris Boyd, but was particularly physical in his coverage. So not a name that's likely to go even remotely close in the early rounds, but it's always fun to watch out for some of these players as the draft unfolds. So there's the names that we've kind of highlighted just now. As we know, the mock drafts change frequently. And speaking of mock drafts, You may have read our way too early mock draft on 99 yards back in October, I think it was. Much has happened since then because that mock draft was way too early. And given it's a season for mock drafts, we thought a top 10 mock live draft on a pod would be a bit fun and get the ball rolling for what will be a fascinating lead up to the draft in Nashville, Tennessee. So with that said, I declare the 2019 99 yards top 10 mock draft open. And with that, the Arizona Cardinals are now on the clock.
Now, I also published my first solo mock draft in mid-January, and I think I wrote something along the lines of the Cardinals would be stupid to not take Nick Bosa with this pick. I've since sat down and watched some film of Quinnen Williams, and that's the pick here, defensive tackle from Alabama. They have more of a need on the inside of their D-line rather than the edge. They've got Chandler Jones there. He's good coming off the edge. Rather than pairing him up with another edge prospect, get someone in the middle, cause some inside pressure onto your quarterbacks. You've got some fantastic offensive players in that division. Let's load up, but in a different position and create different pressures. So Quinnen Williams, defensive tackle from Alabama, is the pick at number 1. And with that, the San Francisco 49ers are now on the clock.
And with the second overall pick in the 99 yards top 10 mock draft, the San Francisco 49ers select Nick Bosa, defensive end from Ohio State. Despite sitting out most of the season injured, for me, Bosa is still the best player in the draft. He's going to wreak havoc in the NFC West for years. Let's hope for his sake the injuries behind him is that, the Bosa history of injuries. We've seen it with Joey Bosa. Let's hope that's not something that continues for Nick. He's going to be some player in the NFL for a number of years. And with that, the New York Jets are on the clock.
And with the third pick of the draft, the New York Jets pick Josh Allen, defensive end for Kentucky. And there's been a lot of chat in various mock drafts, and I think we gushed about Josh Allen in our last college podcast. Here's a guy that has ranged from the first pick all the way down to the 10th pick, and he's a superb athlete. I think the Jets will be very happy. They've got someone of this caliber. The depth of this draft is now well publicised, but to get someone like Josh Allen at this, I think will be a significant upgrade for the Jets, who need a lot of help. And with that, they can I call them the Las Vegas Raiders? Maybe not yet. The Oakland Raiders are now on the clock.
I think we'll just go with the Raiders because we still don't know where they're going to play next year. I've gone edge rusher here. I've gone Brian Burns from Florida State. Now, Burns has seen probably the most meteoric rise of draft in the draft so far. He has an awful lot of talent on the edge, and I think people are just catching up to his film and seeing that. He is, in my opinion, the third best edge prospect in this class. The Raiders need difference makers on both sides of the ball. And I think edge is the position you go with who's come off the board and who's left. Get Brian Burns in there. He's not as heralded a name yet as Nick Bosa and Josh Allen, or even possibly Clelin Ferrell, but he could be a difference maker. He fits the scheme, and he's just the type of player you want coming off the edge in the silver and black. And with that, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are now on the clock.
And with the fifth overall pick of the 99 yards top 10 mock draft, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Devin White, linebacker, LSU. The Bucs have got holes all over the roster, except probably for defensive end. So White gives them a dominant force at linebacker. His loss, it was truly felt by LSU in the first half against Alabama when he'd been kicked out of the game, the previous game, for targeting. LSU were a different team when he wasn't in it, and I think he'll make a big difference to that Tampa Bay unit. With that, the New York Giants are on the clock.
No one to big up this pick, but I have the feeling that this might be the most anticipated pick in the first round, because the New York Giants are much publicised as to where they might have some needs, and with the sixth pick of the draft, the New York Giants do in fact pick a quarterback, Dwayne Haskins of Ohio State, and. Anyone who's been following mock drafts over the last couple of weeks have seen a variety of nonsense where several teams are trading up to get Haskins or Drew Lock, or indeed Kyler Murray, if that turns to be the case. But I think the Giants will get a quarterback in this draft. The only thing that's going to hold them back from getting Dwayne Haskins is, in fact, if the Broncos trade up to maybe number 2 or number 3 to make sure that they get him. The question is whether Haskins is worth trading up to number 2 or 3 to get it. But I think by this, they get a quarterback, a mobile quarterback, and frankly, the proposition of having Saquon Barkley and Dwayne Haskins as your QB and running back is quite appealing. And with that, the Jacksonville Jaguars are now on the clock.
The Jacksonville Jaguars select Jonah Williams, offensive tackle, Alabama, and I think he is a tackle. I think you give him a shot to play tackle in the NFL, and if it doesn't work, you kick him inside and you've got a Pro Bowl guard. Williams is so talented. You don't start as a freshman on Alabama's offensive line unless you are an otherworld talent at the position. I think he's got everything you need to succeed down in Jacksonville. I imagine that they're going to go with an older quarterback. They're not going to get burnt trying to go and draft someone like they did last time when they drafted Blake Bortles and it didn't work out. They're going to go for a proven commodity. It's a win-now team. Put Williams on it, get some leadership in that team, and go again, load up again, try and get to the Super Bowl because they've got the talent to do it. And with that, the Detroit Lions are now on the clock.
The 8th overall pick of the 99 yards top 10 mock draft, the Detroit Lions absolutely sprint to the podium to select Clelin Ferrell, defensive end of Clemson. For me, Ferrell's the best available player here. I also think he's one of the best edge rushers in the class. I've watched a lot of Clemson this year. I think he's going to give Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, and Mitchell Trubisky absolute nightmares for years to come. The Lions, they've currently got Ziggy Ansah in there. He's often injured. I think Ferrell goes in there immediately. He upgrades the position, and he's a starter for the Lions for as long as they can keep hold of him. And with that, the Buffalo Bills are on the clock.
And with the 9th pick of the 99 yards live mock draft, the Buffalo Bills pick Rashan Gary, defensive end from Michigan, and Brandon Beane, the Bills GM, is on record as saying that they will pick the best available player at that point in the draft, and Ollie's of the opinion that Clelin Ferrell is the best available at that point, and I certainly think that Rashan Gary is the best available at that point in the picks, and for a player who was the number one prospect when he went to Michigan, he's not disappointed, and to me, I think that would be a great pick for the Bills, who need help all over the place, but especially in defense. And with that, the Denver Broncos are now on the clock.
This may well be the most predicted pick in all of mock drafts, because with the 10th overall pick, the Broncos select Drew Lock, quarterback from Missouri. In the words of Dan Hanzus, and I'm not going to try and do the impression, this one's for John. John Elway needs to hit on a quarterback in this draft. If he doesn't, his job's in jeopardy, and that is incredible to think, considering what he's done for that franchise. But he's missed too many times now. He has to hit on a quarterback. I'm not sure I agree with this pick in terms of talent level, but I think considering what we've seen already from the Senior Bowl and what we're hearing coming out of so many different draft analysts and media members across the NFL, the Broncos are infatuated with Drew Lock, and they are going to pick him at 10 overall, because I don't think anyone else will trade up to get him. I don't see it myself, but this is who the Broncos are going to get.
And it's kind of interesting one, because I think you're right. Broncos find themselves under a lot of pressure to get a quarterback, because the Case Keenum thing just hasn't worked out. If you don't think Drew Lock's the pick, is there a quarterback in the draft that is worthy of the pick, or are you looking at someone in free agency?
See, it's a tough one, because they only signed Case Keenum last year, so it's tough to then load up with another free agent quarterback. Although this year the class is that much better. If you can get away from Keenum and go after someone like a Joe Flacco, to even just to tide you over a year, because next year is so much better for picking quarterbacks. There are so many good young quarterbacks in the 2020 class. If Elway can buy himself a year, and he's the kind of executive who can buy himself a year, you could get someone like a Jake Fromm or a Tua Tagovailoa coming out early, pick them, go into not next season, the season after, and really load up with your rookie quarterback. I think this year is not the year to be reaching. If you can get up and you can take Dwayne Haskins, take him, because for me, he's the only one. Kyler Murray has got playmaking ability, but I just think with his size in the NFL, he's going to get hurt a lot, and I'm just not sure if his body can withstand facing up against the grown men that you face in the NFL. It's not like college. Size really does matter in the NFL. Even you look at a Russell Wilson, although he's a shorter quarterback, he's not skinny. He's still got a thick build, and that helps him out. He can take hits. Someone like a Kyler Murray, there's not really been someone of that build succeed in the NFL over a long period, and so I think taking him with a really high draft pick is really, really risky. And
Ollie, we in the top 10, we don't have the Jags picking quarterback, and maybe more controversially, we don't have the Raiders picking a quarterback. Do you see either of those teams having to? I think Raiders is a more controversial discussion, but do you see the Jags going for a QB?
No, I don't. And I know Alex thinks the Raiders might make a move for a quarterback as well. It would depend what they would have to give up to move up to get a quarterback, because they've got a lot of picks this year, which would lend itself to thinking they could put a package of those together and move up to number one, even if needs be, with the Cardinals. They're only moving up from 4. But, even a short move like that at the top does require a lot of draft currency. They've got Mike Mayock driving the ship down in, as we said earlier, Oakland, Las Vegas, San Francisco, wherever it might be. He's the man that can use that currency most wisely, I suspect, across the whole of the NFL. He's been the premier draft analyst for a number of years, and I think he's the man that can get them the most value out of the picks that they have without going up there. The relationship between Derek Carr and John Gruden clearly was rocky at times this year, which would lend itself to the theory that they might want to look how they could replace him or get something back out of him, because he's got a huge contract, Derek Carr, at the end of the day as well. I don't see the Raiders going for a quarterback. The Jags, I think, are more likely to pick up one in free agency, as we've discussed. I don't think it's Joe Flacco, and I think Alex mentioned he thinks Flacco will stay in Washington in a separate conversation that we had. He thinks he'll go to the Redskins as their Alex Smith situation isn't going to resolve itself this year.
No, I think Jacksonville look to repair John DeFilippo and Nick Foles. I think that's what you want to do. If you're loading up to go on another Super Bowl run, you try and pair the Super Bowl MVP quarterback with his quarterback's coach from the year that they won the Super Bowl, and then you just give it a go. You've got to try it and find combinations that work. We saw Kirk Cousins and DiFilippo didn't work in Minnesota, but it could work here down in Jacksonville if you get someone that DiFilippo's familiar with, knows how to call plays well for. It could be the kind of combination that sends the Jags over the top because they don't have to lean on their run game quite so much.
Well, the good thing is we've got between now and the first week in April to talk a lot more about that. That's all for this week's show, and I hope you enjoyed our college football podcast. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the topics we discussed, and of course, any feedback you may have, you can tweet us at 99 Yards. If you're a regular listener and enjoy our show, we'd love you to leave a star review via Apple Podcast or the provider you're listening to us through. Thanks for listening.